Okay, so today we're going to continue on in Chapter 8, talking a little bit about evolution and natural selection. And seems like kind of a weird lighting. Let me see if I can figure out how to change this around a little bit. Not that one. Not that. Is that okay? Yes.
Just real quick, looking at the Big Picture Biology website. If we use that, do we even need this for class now?
Yeah, because you're still doing your lab reports on it right now that you hand in to your teaching assistant.
Speaking of, in at least the evolution game, it gives all of the questions that were in last week's slide report.
It gives all the questions.
It doesn't have the graph, but it has everything else. Like it says, for example, give an example of two species that interact so closely in the world that do not evolve.
I'm hoping that eventually you'll be able to just buy the website instead of the manual and save the paper. I mean, that's what I'm all about. But for right now, it's kind of you get both of them, and so I hadn't finished that part yet, and I actually just finished it this last weekend. That's what I spent my whole weekend doing. So yes, it's coming up, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're going to pass this semester, so you won't need to worry about next semester. So that is my hope. Okay. So we had talked a little bit the last time about agricultural pests and the way that we could see evolution actually happening, where things are going through tiny microscopic changes in order to become better able to survive in an environment. So like what you did in the lab with the natural selection and evolution game, where you had variations in the number of predators and variations in the number of prey. We have pests that are out there, like if you imagine grasshoppers that are trying to eat corn, or if you've got worms that are trying to eat tomatoes. What's actually happening is not that the strongest are surviving, it's that the weakest are losing and being taken out of the gene pool. So what basically happens is if we go out and spray for pests in agriculture, and we spray, and then the weakest, or the losers, are the ones that are going to die off, and if they don't get a chance to reproduce and pass along their genes to their offspring, then their genes are going to get removed from the gene pool. So just like this week in your lab, you're going to be talking about antibiotic resistance. When you take a round of antibiotics, you're told to take it for 10 days because the bacteria that will die first will be the weakest of those bacteria. And then the next day, you take your next round of antibiotics, and then the weakest bacteria of those die. Then the next day, you take your next round of antibiotics, and the weakest of those die. And you have to take your antibiotics all the way up until day 10, because if you don't, then the only ones that will be left surviving at the end are going to be the strongest of those bacteria. So when we spray crops in agriculture with pesticides, the weakest ones are going to be the ones that are killed off first, and the strongest are going to be the ones that survive. So basically, it wouldn't be so much survival of the fittest as it would be removing the losers from the population, but that doesn't sound as good. So imagine this example. We have natural selection happening in nature. If we have 3 rabbits, and the blue rabbit is very fast, the green rabbit is medium fast, and the yellow rabbit is very, very slow, we know that between rabbits there are some variations in running speed. Maybe some are very, very fast, maybe some are very, very slow. And so the rabbits that are very fast are going to have very fast babies. The ones that are medium fast are going to have medium fast babies. And the ones that are very slow, they're going to have babies that are going to be the first ones to get eaten by the predator. And so the slower the rabbit is, the more the fox can catch of them. And then as the fox eats up all of the slow rabbits, then he has to move to the medium-fast rabbits. So he eats all of them. So the only ones that are left behind are the ones that are the fastest. So they removed the losers from the race, and they let the winners go on to survive and reproduce. So we are removing the losers of the race. And so through natural selection, populations of organisms can become adapted to their environment. Just like we talked last time about camels being really the only big mammals that you see in the desert, they are uniquely suited to that environment because a regular horse wouldn't be able to survive long periods of time without food, without water, with the sand blowing in its eyes. So camels are uniquely suited to their environment. So in survival of the fittest, what we're really looking at is reproductive success. So the measure of the relative amount of reproduction of an individual with a particular phenotype, so a particular trait, as compared to the reproductive output of individuals with alternative phenotypes. So what all of that basically says is the ones that can survive the best survive. The ones that can't survive very well are going to lose and are going to die off. And so the ones that are the best at being able to survive have the most babies, and the ones that are the worst at being able to survive don't get a chance to reproduce because their genes get taken out of the gene pool really, really quickly. And so with the fruit fly example that we talked about in class the last time, where they went through the starvation and seeing whether the fruit flies would be able to survive very long, and then after 60 generations, after repeating the experiment 60 times, they found that the flies were able to live 160 hours instead of just 20 hours. One fly is going to carry the genes for a version of a trait that allows it to survive. So one of those flies is survival of the fittest. One of those flies has genes that makes it so that it can best survive in the environment and it can survive a long time without food. If another fly has genes that only allow it to survive a short time, as soon as you take the food away from it, then it's going to die off. That means it doesn't get to pass on its genes to its offspring, and that means it's going to essentially go extinct. So the fly that has the greater fitness, evolutionary fitness, is the one that's able to survive and pass along its genes to its offspring. So alleles carried by individuals with high fitness, so the ones that are able to survive really well, will increase their market share in a population over time, and then the population will evolve, or the population will change to favor the ones that are best able to survive. So when we say the strong will survive, that's really true. Being able to survive in a population is good for your genes, because if you survive and pass those genes on to your offspring, then those genes are still there. So there are three important elements to an organism's fitness. The first is an individual's fitness is measured relative to other genotypes or phenotypes in the population. So we're only measuring one organism as compared to the same organism. So we're looking at all rabbits, or looking at all foxes, or looking at all fruit flies. So we're comparing them to members of their own species. And so if the fastest rabbits are able to survive, then those genes will be passed along. And if they are very slow rabbits and they get eaten by foxes, they don't get to pass on their genes, and their genes eventually go extinct. So we're comparing apples to apples, or comparing oranges to oranges. We want to compare the same species to each other. The second thing is that fitness is specific to the environment in which the organism lives. If I were to ask you, outside of the environment that a mouse lives in, which is better, a sand-colored mouse or a soil-colored mouse? Well, what do I mean by better? If we are not in the actual environment, then we can't actually make that determination. So if you imagine we have a scenario where we've got a sandy background, and in a lighter habitat, the alleles for the lighter colored fur is fitter and will increase in frequency. Because what's going to happen? as the birds are circling around here over top of these mice, the ones that they're going to see first are going to be the soil-colored mice. And so these guys are going to be able to survive and pass on their sand-coloredness to their offspring. On the other hand, though, if we are in a habitat where we've got a darker colored background, then the soil-colored mouse is going to be able to blend into the background. And if there are hawks flying around here over the top, they're going to pick off all of these guys first. And so these guys don't get to reproduce and pass on their genes to their offspring. These guys do. So it is environmentally dependent. There's no better unless you're looking at how they're able to survive in the particular environment. And then the third part is that fitness depends on an organism's reproductive success compared to other organisms in the population. So what it says in that little white bulleted points at the bottom is if you are sterile and you never have babies, your fitness is 0. So if you can't ever find anybody to reproduce with, then you don't get to pass your genes along to your offspring because you don't have any offspring. On the other hand, if you manage to inherit an allele that causes you to die at half the age of everyone else, but also causes you to have twice as many offspring as the average, then your fitness is increased. It's all about how fast you can make the most babies. So if we put that into the mouse example, if we have this mouse and he's in the sandy colored background and he can make 5 babies, and we have this mouse that's in the sandy colored background and he can make 20 babies, then if they both have babies before he gets eaten off, then he's going to leave more babies behind. And so those more babies are going to give him a greater fitness until eventually he gets all of his offspring pulled out of the environment because they all get eaten off anyways. It's funny because I watched a documentary one time about evolution and how this happens, and they call these mice the Snickers bar of the desert because basically everybody eats them. And so I would hate to be a poor mouse because that seems like the organism that everybody loves to get their hands on. So snakes eat them, lizards eat them, mammals eat them, birds eat them, everything loves to eat them. And so they are the Snickers bar of the desert. And so is that the... survival of the fittest is not exactly correct. It's going to be survival of the strongest and the ones that can make the most babies and the ones that can survive. So being fit means you have to be able to pass your genes on to offspring. When we think about fitness, we think about strength, like being able to lift weights. Here we're talking about being able to pass your genes on to your offspring. So here we have an interesting example. Sometimes organisms in a population can become better matched to their environment through natural selection. So imagine we've got these porcupines. Porcupines are very reproductively advantaged because nothing can eat them. Nothing can go in and eat a porcupine or it's going to get a face full of quills. And so it has a unique adaptation that allows it to survive in the environment. There are lots of different advantages that we talk about in the environment, things like being toxic, being poison, having quills, having thorns, having spikes, all kinds of really unique ways that things are able to be better suited to their environment. So porcupines are one great example. Another example that I can think of is, so my whole family, we're all scuba divers, and the last time we went on a scuba diving trip, we went down to Belize, which is in Central America. It's on the Yucatan Peninsula right by Mexico. And so while we were out scuba diving and looking at the beautiful coral reefs, the people that were the scuba diving guides said, if you see a lionfish, don't touch it, but tell us about it. Because lionfish is an invasive species down there that if you touch it, it will sting you and you will get poisoned and you will die. And so a lot of the local animals, since it had become an invasive species, the local animals don't know that if you touch it, you will die. And so the lionfish was basically taking over the reef, and it was causing a lot of devastation. So they don't want you to touch it, because obviously they don't want you to die. They want your money from scuba diving. But they want to get rid of it. So they carry spears with them to spear the lionfish and try and get it out of the coral reef. So that's something interesting we'll talk about when we talk about invasive species and ecology. But the lionfish is uniquely adapted to be able to survive in the coral reefs. And there's lots of organisms like that. So an adaptation, the spines or the spikes or the barbs or having sharp teeth or having quills or having poisonous leaves or poisonous flowers. These are all adaptations, which are a process by which organisms become better matched to their environment, and the specific features that make an organism more fit occurs as the result of natural selection. So, for example, if we're talking about butterflies in the rainforest, the butterflies have natural variation to them, but if they have a variation that makes them able to better blend into the background and not be seen by birds and not be eaten as prey, then they will naturally be able to go on and survive and reproduce and pass on those genes to the offspring. If they are a butterfly that looks completely unique and unlike anything else in the environment, and they stand out so much that the birds are able to immediately identify them, then they will get eaten off and they will die. Unless they've developed something like a toxin or a poison, or sometimes we talk about mimicry, where something looks like a poisonous animal, but it's not poisonous itself. So lots of really interesting adaptations that are out there that are specific to environments. So things that can survive in that environment. Obviously, if you put a butterfly in the Arctic snow, it's not going to survive very well. It's not going to pass on its genes to its offspring. Same thing if we were to toss a polar bear into the coral reef. Things are specifically suited to the environment in which they live. So natural selection does not lead to a perfect organism. There is no such thing as a perfect organism because the environment is constantly changing. So on the Galapagos Islands, which is where Darwin went and studied and came up with his theory of natural selection, there are lots of different food supplies. And you've probably heard that out there in the environment there are droughts, there are rainy seasons. So in dry years, the finches that eat the large hard seeds and that have bigger beaks were selected for. And then as the environment changed over a period of years, in the wet years the finches could eat the small soft seeds and have smaller beaks. And so those smaller beaks were selected for. But we're going to always see variation in the environment. We're going to have some years that are wet and some years that are dry. And so that's going to make some food sources more available and other food sources not available. So the ones that can get the food the best are the ones that are going to be fat and happy and having lots of sex and having lots of babies. And if you are starving and you can't eat any of the food, then you don't want to have sex and you don't have a whole lot of babies, and then you don't pass on your genes to your offspring. So there's never going to be a perfect organism. There's always going to be variations in the environment, so variations in the genes. And so the reason natural selection never leads to the production of a perfect organism is simply because of the environment. So factors that prevent them from progressing inevitably towards perfection. Environments change very quickly. As you guys know, there's weather patterns and climate changing all around the world. And not just over a period of years, but over a period of decades and centuries. If you think about ice ages are a global problem that's happened many times in the past. So the environment is always changing. And variation is needed as the raw material of selection. If you look around this room right now, we are all human, hopefully, and we are all different. if you look at a big school of fish, you're going to have some that are better swimmers and some that are worse swimmers. And the ones that are the best swimmers are going to pass along their genes to their offspring. The ones that are the worst swimmers are going to get eaten up fast. And so there may be multiple different alleles for a trait causing an individual to have the same fitness. So they may have different genes that make them equally good at doing things in the environment. And so if you look here at this group of apples, you can see how we have artificially selected. So in natural selection, what happens in nature is what decides. But in artificial selection, humans get to decide what is it that we want from an apple. And if you go around this room and ask every person in here, what's your favorite kind of apple? We may have 10 different responses. Everybody prefers different things. Maybe you like them green, maybe you like them red, maybe you like them sweet, maybe you like them tart, maybe you like them juicy, maybe you like them soft and mushy. I don't know, I can think of tons of different characteristics that apples have. Some are little tiny apples, some are great big apples. And so apple growers have produced a wide variety of different types of apples to meet people's different taste buds. We have different things that we want from apples. Seems like when I go back to my childhood, it was like your choices were red or green. That was really all that you got. And now you have so many different choices out there, and you have different choices in different places around the world where they have different environments. And so it's just a matter of taste, and it's a way of showing that we can get what we want by putting different gene combinations together. So natural selection can change the traits seen in a population in several ways. So here we have traits such as cleft chin. We've got the blue individual has a cleft chin, and the green individual has a smooth chin. And so we may find that we have continuous ranges, like in height. You have some people that are tall, some people that are a little shorter than them, a little shorter, shorter, shortest people. So variation in those traits. Some things are one or the other, and some things are everything that's in between. So whether a given trait is influenced by one gene or by complex interactions of many genes in the environment, it can be subject to natural selection and can be changed in any number of ways. So one of them is directional selection. Directional selection is where we have an individual with one extreme from the range of variation in the population that has higher fitness. So if you're trying to raise dairy cows and you want cows that have the most milk, then directional selection means why would we ever breed the cows that don't make very much milk? We only breed the cows that make the most milk, so then we can have babies that make even more milk. And then we pick the babies that make the most of the milk. We don't breed together the ones that don't make very much. We breed the ones together that make more. So between the 1920s and 1945, the average milk production increased by about 50% in the United States. So farmers only let the cows with lots of milk breed. And so we've gone from just normal cows in the direction of these mega cows that are producing 50% more milk. What?
The cows, black spots.
It looks like the United States, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or the world.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting. I had never noticed that. Now I won't be able to unsee that. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to look at every cow and I'm going to be like, I wonder where the ones with the world on it are. Who knows? Now I kind of want to look at the rest of the pictures and see if they have hidden messages in them. So here's another example of directional selection. Here we've got turkeys that the ones that had smaller breast muscles, they didn't want to breed those together because they're less valuable. They don't make as much turkey meat. And so the population, before they started breeding for the larger breasted turkeys, we had a shift. So we can see the directional shift, a change in the average breast size that's going from smaller to larger. Who would want to breed together the smaller breast-muscled turkeys when you could breed together the larger breast-muscled turkeys that make you more money? So that's what they've essentially done. They've even gotten to the point where these turkeys are so breast heavy in the front that the male turkeys cannot naturally breed together with the female turkeys. They have to artificially inseminate every turkey because their breasts are so huge. I'm not going to make the motions or anything, but they can't get on the females in order to breed together. So they have to artificially inseminate every turkey so what would happen if we threw these turkeys out in nature? Well, nothing. These turkeys would live, then they would die off because they couldn't breed together naturally. There'd be no way for them to be able to survive in nature. So another example where you can think of how medicine has changed the human population, medical technology has made it so that we don't just have babies that are born of one size. So if you're thinking in here about what size you were when you were born, some of you may have been over 9 pounds, over 10 pounds. I had a friend that was an 11-pound baby that was born naturally. So awful. And then some of you may have been little tiny babies, 6 pounds, 5 pounds. You may have spent a long time in the hospital. I've even heard of, and I have a slide that's coming up here that'll talk about the biggest babies versus the littlest babies. But we have something called stabilizing selection. If you think about humans in their natural form, imagine we had no hospitals, no doctors. If you were having a baby and you were out in the middle of the rainforest, if you were having a baby, if the baby got to be too big and you couldn't have the baby naturally, then both baby and mom die. So genes taken out of the gene pool. If you have a baby that's too small and there's no doctors and no hospitals, then the baby dies and the mother has no evolutionary fitness because she can't pass her genes along to her offspring if her babies are too small to survive. So babies that were of one size, the size that was big enough to come out and big enough, so small enough to come out, big enough to live, those were the ones that survived and were able to grow up to be adults. And so it used to be there was only, about between 7 and 8 pounds. That was all that babies were born. Now, thanks to medical technology, these 10, 11-pound babies that are born via cesarean section, the mother recovers from the C-section. The baby goes on to grow up and pass along his genes to his offspring. So this graph has gotten wider. It used to be only these guys survived, and now it is that all the way down to 3 pounds, all the way up to 12 pounds. Now we've got a wider range of babies surviving. So this is called stabilizing selection, where we go from having a small amount right in the middle that survive to having a wider amount or a bigger base of babies that survive. So we have selective pressure that happened before, and we have selective pressure that happens at a low weight, selective pressure that happens at a high weight. So we tend to have this smaller graph. Now, this next picture is really interesting. I Googled what was the biggest baby ever born. And so this baby was 22 pounds and came out naturally, so no C-section. This mother was diabetic and didn't know it. She didn't have any access to health care. And so because she was diabetic, pouring tons of sugar through her bloodstream, the baby gets an extreme amount of sugar throughout the pregnancy, grows to be abnormally large, and was born naturally at 22 pounds. And so that's the baby next to a normal-sized baby. It's twice as big. It's unbelievable. I believe it was in Guatemala. The other baby, this next baby, the preemie was born in the United States. It was born at 22 weeks, and it weighed less than 10 ounces. It was about the weight of a pen. It was that small. I mean, look at its little tiny feet in the nurse's hands. It's unbelievable. And so this baby was kept alive from, I mean, that's essentially half a pregnancy. The 22 weeks is essentially born halfway through. And so they were able to keep him alive, and he grew up to be a nice, normal, happy baby. And so these are interesting questions, because then you start to have like your ethical thoughts, like, you know, what about abortion? It's definitely a question. There are women that have abortions after 22 weeks. So knowing that baby could survive, is that something that's ethical to do? And you don't have to answer that. Those are hypothetical questions. And so we have other questions we ask as scientists. Should we try to save every baby, human or animal? So some people think, like, if they have their favorite dog gives birth to a litter of puppies, and some of the puppies are having trouble, they take them into the vet. It might be thousands of dollars, and they may be able to save those babies. But is every one of those lives something that should be saved, even if it grows up to have genetic deficiencies or may not live past infancy? There are some people that say, yes, we should save every human, so we should put all of our money into saving every human, but not trying to save animal babies. And then there are some people that say, if a baby can't survive on its own, then it's not going to make it to adulthood anyways, and so we shouldn't try. And there are varying questions throughout that field, and that's why bioethics is an important consideration. Here we have another case of selection where we have what's called disruptive selection. Now, this is so I've said survival of the fittest, survival of the strongest, survival of the ones that are able to pass on their genes the best. Here we have what's called survival of the sneakiest. So this is the coho salmon. So this salmon was naturally about right here in the middle. We've got where most of the size of them are. But here we have what's called selective pressure. So medium fishes get outcompeted for territory by large fish. So if you're a large fish, you can fight for your territory. You can get rid of those medium-sized fish. And so he's got his territory. It seems like the strongest, the largest are going to be the ones to survive. But then we also have some smaller fish that are super sneaky, and they sneak into the territory behind the larger fish's back, and they go in and inseminate his eggs. And so this would be selective pressure, where the smallest could pass on their genes to offspring, and the largest could pass on their genes to offspring, but the ones in the middle, they've got no chance, because if you're in the middle, the largest fish are getting you out of their territory, and if you're small, you can sneak in behind the large fish. And so what's essentially happening here is that individuals with extreme phenotypes, extremely large, extremely small, will have the highest fitness, and those with the middle phenotypes, the ones with the middle sizes, are going to have the lowest. So disruptive selection, it disrupts between the largest and the smallest. So natural selection can cause the evolution of complex traits and behaviors. So one of the organisms that we're going to look at in our labs is the betta fish. If you've ever been to the pet store and you've seen betta fish, some of them are very plain looking, and now they have these huge, beautiful fish with these beautiful displays on them, and they've got fins, and they've got pectoral fins, and they have colors. Some are blue, some are red. Now they have some that are shiny. They have all kinds of different betta fish, and so we're going to look at how some of those traits are going to interact with animals of other traits, because betta fish are also known as Siamese fighting fish. So the prettier their displays of color, often the more aggressive they are. So those displays and the aggressiveness may be passed along on the same chromosome. So maybe the prettier you get, the more aggressive you get. And the ones that are not so pretty are also not as aggressive. And so that makes a difference in being able to survive in the environment. With betta fish, they're bred artificially, and so they're not out in nature. But we're going to look at some of those traits coming up in the next lab. And so we can also look at traits that are very complex, like rats being able to run a race. So what scientists did was they took rats that were able to run a maze very well and that made the fewest errors. Those were selected and bred with one another. And those that made the most errors were selected and bred with one another. So if you pick, let's just say, if you pick the smartest mice and you pick the stupidest mice and you breed all the smart ones together, the babies are even smarter. And if you pick stupid ones and you breed the stupid ones together, then the babies are even stupider. And so what they found was after 6 generations of selection, the Mays bright rats made only half as many errors as the Mays dull rats. So the smart got smarter and the stupidest got stupider. And so it's interesting because that's a very complex trait, being able to run a maze, being able to figure those things out. So that may also bring along some stereotypes. You may think, well, what if that happens in humans? If the smartest breed together and the stupidest breed together, then what's going to happen?
They did a movie about that, Idiocracy with Luke Wilson.
I don't know that I've seen that.
The scientists go to school and they get an education. They wait till they're in 30s and 40s to breed, while the dumb are breeding in high school and have 30, 40 kids.
Oh my gosh, that sounds about appropriate. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that. Well, you know, and it's funny because, you know, I think I'm pretty smart, and I'm only going to have one child, because we've made sure that that's only going to happen that way. And I have never been married. I'm almost 40. So then, like, I used to teach high school kids, and when I was in Texas, had 100% Spanish-speaking Mexican students, and I used to teach a class on test-taking skills. And so trying to get these kids to be able to pass their high school science tests, their state testing. So they would take the state science test, and you could take it up to 6 times before they wouldn't let you graduate. And so if you didn't pass it, you didn't get to graduate. So and I had this big school. It was like 2,000 kids in this high school. They would hand me usually like about 150 kids after the first round of tests, and they would say, these 150 kids failed their test, get them to pass their test. So then the next test would come along, and I would have like 75 left. And then the next test would come along, and I would have like 50 left. Then the next test, I'd have 25. I finally got down to like my final like 13 kids that couldn't pass the test. And if I looked around the room, this was when I first found out that I was pregnant, the girls were telling me, oh, well, I've already got 2 or 3 kids, and this is what you do when you're pregnant, and this is what you do when you're going to have a kid. And I was like, I'm 30 and I'm having my first child, and some of these girls were 19 and they already had 3 kids. That's just unbelievable. And I also, when I was 29, I had a woman come in for a parent-teacher conference, and she was 28, and she was the girl's grandma. So I wasn't even a first-time parent, and the mother had her daughter when she was 14, and then the daughter had a daughter when she was 13. And so it was someone who was a grandma, and I hadn't even had my first kid yet. It was unbelievable. It's also culturally different. I mean, people have different cultural reasons that they have kids. So it's interesting. 28 and a grandma. That's wild. Okay, so that was kind of an aside. So one of the questions that's often asked about evolution is, how do certain traits come to be part of a individual species if having just a little bit of the trait? So, we talk about traits about changing in incremental little bits. It's not like we have grasshoppers one day and then we have a mutation and they have a full set of wings. So one of the questions is, how could a wing evolve if 1% of a wing doesn't help an organism fly or glide at all? So imagine we've got an organism and it's starting to grow wing nubs. What good is having 1% of a wing if it doesn't help you fly? And I put up a video on the website of how organisms may have started developing wings. It's something that's really fascinating. So here, if we have the beginnings of an organism and it's got a very, very small wing, if it flaps this wing, it may not be able to fly, but flapping this wing may keep it cooler. So if it's in a very hot environment, then having a little bit of a wing is going to help you to be able to survive. Because flapping your wings and making your body cooler allows you to be able to survive better than those that don't have any wings. So if you develop, if these guys all breed together and have babies that have a little bit more of a wing, it starts flapping its wings all around and it doesn't fly yet, but it's able to keep its body cooler. They're able to have some also aerodynamic benefits. If this guy jumps out of a tree, he may be able to coast along to the ground. If this guy jumps out of the tree, then thump, he hits the ground. So this may help him in his survival. And then finally, when we have full-blown wings that have been selected for, as he flaps his wings, not only does he stay very cool, he's also able to take off and fly. And so this is going to be basically going from no wings down here up to having wings that have an aerodynamic benefit, up to having wings that help you fly and keep you cool, which is the best of both worlds. So often structures appear that serve some purpose, but may not serve the ultimate purpose right at the very beginning of their development. So that's why if you've ever been to a really hot region, like I'll even just say, when I lived in Texas, the cockroaches down there were like huge. If you were up here in Ohio and you saw a cockroach, it might be like that big. In Texas, they were giant. If you go to the rainforest and you see the insects down there, they're often huge. Huge butterflies, huge dragonflies, huge everything, huge mosquitoes. And so in the hottest region, we tend to find animals with the biggest wings because the bigger your wings are, the easier it is to stay cool in the hottest of the regions. So the evidence for evolution is overwhelming. The things that we first started noticing about fossils and about some of the extinct organisms have now been studied via DNA, studied via genetics, looking at things like stabilizing selection, disruptive selection. And it got to be that there was a lot of fighting that was happening among the scientific and religious communities because both were accusing the other ones of coming up with things that were impossible. And so Pope John Paul in 1996, the head of the Catholic Church, said, basically, why are we going to fight about this anymore? We know that things changed over time. There's no denying that. And so it's not like they made things up to prove that, but we can still have our faith and be able to understand how the earth works. And so basically that's the same. I mean, I am a Christian, and I've always enjoyed going to church. I'm part of a church community, and I still understand how the natural world works. And there's some people in the Christian community that are hardcore creationists and believe the earth is only 6,000 years old, and it's okay to have your beliefs, I think, as long as you look at the evidence that science provides and understand how that works. And so that's what's part of what we're doing here. So the 5 primary lines of evidence. We've got our fossil record. We've got biogeography, basically that living things are different, all in different spots around the world. We've got comparative anatomy and embryology. So some organisms have similar structures and some have similar embryos, the way that they develop inside of the egg. We can look at molecular biology, which is studying the patterns of DNA. And then we can do laboratory and field experiments to understand how things change over time. So one of the problems with fossils that when we first started looking for fossils, we didn't have very many of them, and now every year that goes by we find more and more fossils, so much so that is very interesting about the University of Akron. Here in the biology department at the University of Akron, they've gone to a site over in China, and they found an ancient dinosaur that had feathers on it, and by studying the ancient fossilized feathers, they're actually able to tell what color the dinosaurs may have been. So these dinosaur feathers were grayish, and then they had some red and some black and some white. So they've come up with what some prehistoric early birds may have looked like. And they found the fossilized remains of a giant blue penguin. So there's a penguin that's 6 feet tall and iridescent and blue. It's kind of fascinating to think about. But if you look it up in the University of Akron, you can find scientific papers about it. And the fossil record has been incomplete. You know, there's a lot that we haven't found out there. It's actually really hard to make fossils because there has to be this perfect where the organism dies and gets stuck in sand or stuck in tar and then gets compressed under layers and layers of rock, and then we have to be able to go out and find that fossil. And so we have a very incomplete record, but we're finding more and more of them every day. And so this is one of the first dinosaurs that was found that was the winged dinosaur. And so if my kid was here, he'd be telling you all about this. And then we have another dinosaur. This is just one bone of the tail, and I think, or one segment of the tail. So the one on the left, the one that looks like a bird, is a dinosaur that's about the size of a chicken, and then the one on the right, the dinosaur is humongous. Dinosaurs lived for millions and millions of years that we weren't even around. We hadn't even been thought up yet. And so the way that we know that these dinosaurs lived between 225 and 65 million years ago is due to a process called radiometric dating. And so what they basically do is they look at how the rocks are formed that fossilize these fossils, and they have radioactive isotopes in them. And so the radioactive isotopes break down at a certain rate. And so some rocks you can see are 4.5 billion years old when the Earth first developed. And then here we can see a certain amount of carbon-14, or this one is uranium-238. That has a half-life of 4.5 billion years old. And so 4.5 billion years from now, it would have half as much of this uranium-238 in it. And then 4.5 billion years from then, it would have 1/4. And so we can see that it's constantly declining, and that's how we can tell how old these fossils are by the amount of the radioactive isotope that's left in the fossil. So Darwin never knew that, because we couldn't do that back in Darwin's time. It wasn't until radiometric dating that we were able to say these fossils are 200 million years old and these fossils are 50 million years old. So we're able to figure out that most of the ones deeper down are older, most of the ones up at the top are younger. So we've actually been able to discover the evolutionary history of horses in North America because of their fossilized bones that we've found throughout North America. So we know that the first horses that developed would have been little tiny, and when they developed, they had a different shape to them. They had a different number of toes, and these guys are extinct. They would have first appeared about 55 million years ago. So then this line of horses was a little bit more successful, able to survive, but also went extinct. And at this point, they branched off. We've got these guys, and we've got these guys, and these guys, all three of which are now extinct. Then we've got this one coming off as a branch, This one also went extinct, and this one, the largest of the modern horses, is still alive today. And so we're able to trace those fossils back over millions and millions of years. We're able to see changes in the hoof size, changes in the tail, changes in the backbone, changes in the head structure, changes in the coats of the patterns on the coats, change in like the movement of the appendages. And so the history of the horses goes back 55 million years, and we are able to trace that thanks to being able to find those fossils. So one of the big talking points that people who don't believe evolution occurred is that they say, well, how could you go from being a fish in the water to being an amphibian on the land? There's no way to have that an in-between. And they have actually found a fossil that is a in-between of something that was partly fish, that had limbs, that had gills, but the beginning of the modern lungs, and then was able to climb up out of the water and walk around and be able to be half in the water and half out. So it went from lobe-fin fishes, which is the fishes that we find in our water. Then this guy had a little bit of a different fin. He had a different appendage. These are the early amphibians. This is what their carpals and metacarpals and humerus, radius, ulna. Tiktaalik had gills, scales, fins, like a fish, but arm in joints that resemble those of the amphibians. So they called this guy the missing link. He was the intermediate between fishes and early amphibians. And he would have went extinct about 375 million years ago. So transitional phases. Another place we can see some species distribution and evolutionary history is on the islands of Hawaii. If any of you have ever been to Hawaii, they have these beautiful birds called the Hawaiian honeycreeper. And they've all got different shaped beaks depending on what it is that they eat, similar to the finches in the Galapagos. So they've adapted to a wide range of habitats. We have the mainland finch that is right along the coast of North America. And then once you get out to Hawaii, we've got one type of honeycreeper, another one that has a sharper bill, another one still that sucks the nectar out of flowers. And so they've changed on this island that's very far away from the mainland of North America. And it's all based on what it is that they eat. So history matters. When we talk about who arrived in America first, we know that if we trace humans or hominids back many millions of years, we can trace our ancestry from where we came from. Did we come down from Alaska into the Native American region? Did we come across from Europe? Did we come from Asia? Did we come from Africa? And the reason that humans have kind of differences to themselves is because of the numerous habitats that are available around the world. If we look at the Hawaiian honeycreeper, at the bird, then we know that it's a finch-like descendant of the honeycreepers that arrived in Hawaii about 4 to 5 million years ago, and then rapidly evolved when there weren't other animals around to pick them off. And so we see similar processes happening in all different locations all around the world. Because as we know, no two places are exactly similar. They're different, and they have different species of organisms. So here, if we look at Australia, Australia is kind of a unique place because they have marsupials there, which are mammals that raise their young in pouches. And so if you look at Australian marsupials and their placental counterparts, so the ones that have a placenta that raise their babies inside of them. So in Australia, we've got our sugar glider. In Akron, Ohio, we have gray squirrels. In Australia, they have a numbat. Here we have giant anteaters. I don't think they're here. I think they're maybe Central America, maybe not here. Tasmanian wolf, here in America we have a gray wolf. So they may be less related to each other than you are to a shrew, but these marsupials and their placental counterparts can come to resemble each other as natural selection has adapted them to similar habitats. So when you live in similar habitats, if it's cold, you're going to be furry, because if you're not furry, you're not going to be able to survive where it's cold. If it's ocean, in order to survive in the ocean, you better be able to breathe underwater or dive under the water. If you can't, then you're not going to be able to survive. So that's why we have such diverse biogeography around the world, because things look similar in similar environments. And that is the end of that. I had told the people that I was talking to right at the beginning, you may have come in after this, but I was thinking of moving the class over to the classroom that's adjacent to the lab. So right where the lab is, in Schrank North 251, there's a classroom on the other side where my office is. If you are opposed to that idea, feel free to send me an email and I won't do it. But otherwise, we're going to plan to meet in Schrank Hall North 262. And so put that in your phones, write it in your notes, put it on a Post-it note, and stick it to your door. Next week, we will not meet in this room unless somebody says that doesn't work for me. The reason I thought it would work better is a lot of people have lab there before or after, and it's a lot easier if you don't have to go wandering all around campus to get to those different places. So I'll send out an email the day before. If I haven't heard anything from anyone, we'll plan to meet in Schrank Hall North 262, unless I tell you somebody's got a problem with that. Oh, hold on a second. What? Yeah. Or Thursday. On Thursday. Okay, sorry. On Thursday, yes. And I'll send out an email about it. Schrank Hall North 262. So basically, go to the lab and go to the opposite end of the hall. I'm right across from the Adult Focus lab. 262.
And we'll be there on this following Thursday, this Thursday.
Yeah, 2 days from now. And I'll send out a reminder email, and I'll put it on Springboard, and I'll put it on the website. And if everybody's cool with that, if they're not cool, I'll tell you it's a no-go. But if anybody, I don't know if anyone in here has needs like wheelchair accommodations. We've got all that over there too. Just let me know if there's any problems. We'll plan to meet there. Yay! Hello.
You can get it back to me Thursday. Just
Okay.
I'm going to be leaving for basketball.
Okay, that's good. And so you need me to fill out what you will miss on those days?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you the one that my TA was talking to me about you were going to miss like 4 labs or 5 labs?
Oh, no.
Oh, that was a different person. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was the same person. Okay, I'll get this filled out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just like yeah, and I was like, but I wasn't sure about those.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing really well.
You know, I missed your class on Thursday because we were traveling, and I took my computer to the homework, and
Oh.
it broke. I couldn't do it. I don't know if
Did I post something?
yeah, it was due Sunday at 11:30, but
Oh, I didn't grade it. I didn't grade the homework yet.
could I have a chance to redo it?
We'll have to look at that. Yes. I don't foresee that being a problem. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
But I might need to like plan a timeout with you. So send me an email and we'll figure this out this time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Hello.
Hi. The professor that was here last Thursday used Clicker technology. Are
Uh-huh.
you planning on using that?
I don't, because you have to purchase the clicker,
Okay.
and I didn't want my students to have to pay for that. So, why?
Well,
Did you
I-
like it, or?
No. I did purchase the Clicker technology because I thought we were going to need it for the class.
Oh, for this class?
Yeah, I wasn't sure how long he was going to stay our professor because I wasn't here when you introduced him.
Who was that?
Did we have class here on Tuesday? Or last Thursday?
I think so.
It was the normal class time and everything, but the material seemed really professor.
Maybe you came to a different class.
How could I?
Because
have?
I was here with, do you remember my son
Is-
being here?
No, oh my goodness, maybe I did go to the wrong class. Is floor 4 the exact same as this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. So it was. I looked around and was like,
You
no
can
one
you
in
can
here is
return that
familiar.
clicker. You can tell them you bought it by mistake, and they'll refund your money.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do that.
Ask for
I
a
mean,
refund.
It wasn't that much money, but
It still counts. It still matters. Yeah.
Okay,
I would
that's-
definitely do that.
that's really
That is really crazy. Was it a biology